Welcome to the first This Week in Racing of the 2020s, and because my YouTube channel started in 2008, I have now uploaded YouTube videos in 3 different decades. Good Lord, I'm a boomer. But that is not here nor there. We have got things to look forward to and things to talk about this week. Many things breaking just past the new year involving IndyCar, NASCAR, and believe it or not, even midget racing. So let's get into it on This Week in Racing and start talking about what's breaking in the world. So the Chili Bowl entry list, the biggest midget race of the year, just came out, and of interest are 3 IndyCar drivers driving for Jonathan Bird. Connor Daly, who ran the race last year, James Davison, who's doing a huge schedule, a diverse schedule of races this year, including the Rolex 24, Daytona 500, Indy 500, and of course the Chili Bowl, as well as a surprise, Santino Ferrucci will be joining the team, making his midget debut. Of course, he's a road racer with Formula 2 experience, of course, the IndyCar the last couple of years. So it'll be interesting to see how Santino Ferrucci is able to adapt to sprint cars. IndyCar announced that they will indeed enforce track limits at turn 19 at the Circuit of the Americas. Now, that's a change of pace from last year where there were no track limit violations, so IndyCar drivers were able to drive wherever and whenever they want to on any pavement that their car wanted to stick to. That will no longer be the case, and it will be enforced by a timing line that is out, I guess, put in the out-of-bounds line. Now, this was something that I worried about when IndyCar first went to Circuit of the Americas last year. The fact that a race or maybe several positions or possibly even a championship going down to the end of the season could be determined by a track limits violation. And so the slippery slope begins, and we're just going to have to see how it all works out at Circuit of the Americas next March. ISM has split with Phoenix Raceway. ISM was the title sponsor of the track, in fact going so far as to rename the track to ISM Raceway, but this split, as reported by Adam Stern this afternoon, means that the track will revert to its former name, Phoenix International Raceway. Now, here is the question that I have. There has been, believe it or not, nearly $178 million in upgrades and renovations made to the track since 2010. One of the biggest ones coming just recently, as an entire new fan village was built in the infield of the track. Now, seeing as ISM, as reported by Adam Stern, was originally a multi-year deal, now just becoming a 2-year deal, something that looked like it was long-term, no longer long-term. What does that do for the financial stability of Phoenix International Raceway going forward? What will happen with this track? Now, one of the things that is working in their favor, at least for this year, is that they have the season finale for the Cup Series, and of course for all the NASCAR series. But going forward into 2021, 2022, 2023, if they don't retain that important spot on the calendar, which again I speculated as soon as it came out was because of the fact that they had a new title sponsor and invested a bunch in their renovations, what could happen to this track going forward? It will be something to keep an eye on, and this isn't the last time we're going to be talking about ISM or Phoenix Raceway in this video, because NASCAR looks like they're going to be pulling out all the stops to make sure that this race is not the disaster that many predicted it was going to be in November of this year. Helio Castroneves is back with Penske racing for the Indianapolis 500. Of course, he drives full-time for them in the IMSA WeatherTech Sports Car Series, but he will indeed return to the Indy GP and the Indianapolis 500 this year throughout the entire month of May for Penske Racing. Now, here's the deal. Because this was announced so late, because it seemed like there was a lot of speculation, hey, maybe Helio, this year, 2019 was his last year. I would say the later this process starts to get, the later Helio gets announced in the years, it makes me more and more nervous that it will indeed be his last year in the Indianapolis 500. This may well be his last attempt to try to get that record-tying 4th Indy 500 win. Of course, the changing face of IndyCar is younger drivers, a lot of drivers coming up now that have immense levels of talent, and Roger Penske isn't going to continue to enter 4 cars for aging superstars. He's going to be looking for the best and brightest. And I suspect part of the reason why Helio took so long to announce this year was because of all the question marks around Penske Racing about specifically whether or not Alexander Rossi would become a 4th full-time car at that team. Now, next year there is some speculation about where Simon Pagenaud could end up. If Penske somehow reverts to a 2-car team full-time for next year, maybe I could see a scenario where Helio Castroneves would remain for 2021 at the Indy 500. But that's a long way in the future. At least for now, Helio fans rejoice, he's back. And a bit of a segue off of the former ISM Raceway story. NASCAR will debut a new short track package as reported by Adam Stern. Now it will change the splitter and it will change the rear spoiler of the car. I would assume, though it's not confirmed, it will be similar to the package that they are testing with the next gen or Gen 7 car that we have seen testing at ISM or Phoenix Raceway as it will now be known. Of course, we do know as well that Phoenix will host the finale. And what we also know is that there was a huge, major fan backlash to Phoenix this year. The race right before, I guess it was the cutoff race for the Final Four. Everybody, you know, the fans really spoke on that one. And I think NASCAR heard it because it was a race that was unpopular with the fans. And it was one that had everybody going, oh my God, the Final Four race, the championship decider next year is going to be absolutely awful. Of course, if you listen to my channel when they announced this, in March, the schedule in March, I would have told you the same thing. So one of the other things that was reported by Adam Stern was the fact that the team owners have agreed, approved of this. And one of the things that NASCAR seemed to be trying to do with the new package, outside of try to manipulate the racing, make everything closer, possibly produce some pack racing, which obviously didn't happen, was to make sure that the teams were bringing the same package or the same parts, the same equipment to every single race in a somewhat vain attempt to keep the costs down. Of course, now they're starting to go back on that. And their perfect package, which, you know, was produced the best racing we've ever seen, as some people seem to say, at least early on. I think most people kind of towards the end started to see the light, but you know, NASCAR kind of maintained that, oh yeah, we like what we're seeing with the package. Or do you now? So, and it's a shame too, because it certainly doesn't help NASCAR at this point that the team owners have to start spending a little bit more money. Obviously, it's not going to be a huge amount of money, but ultimately, you got to do something. And if the package is not working, I will commend NASCAR for looking at it and saying, look, we got a problem here. We've got the season finale at this track that clearly didn't produce a very good race. We've moved it from Homestead, which by all accounts is a pretty popular place for the season finale. It's a track that the cars race good on, pretty much regardless of the package, even though I think some people didn't particularly like this year's Homestead race. So, I mean, they're going to have a whole year to develop this package. They've got enough short tracks to make it work, or at least figure out what does and doesn't work about it before they get to Phoenix. But it does seem like this year is going to be another one of those years in NASCAR where things are just, you know, there's going to be a lot of unhappy fans with the way the package is and the way the cars race. Probably going to be a lot of unhappy drivers. I'm sure we'll get some Kyle Busch quotes probably at the beginning of the year, like it always seems to happen. And of course, the Daytona 500 is going to be the first time they will have run that package at that race. How's that all going to turn out? So there's a lot of things NASCAR rules-wise going forward that we're going to have to take a look at, because all these things are going to affect the development of that Gen 7 next-gen car that will start racing in the Cup Series in 2021. So it's a pretty important year for NASCAR. They've got a lot of things to get right and a lot of things to fix. And, of course, we'll be keeping tabs on it as it develops. And finally, we got some interesting tidbits on the Indianapolis 500 entry list from Jenna Fryer of the Associated Press over on Twitter. She reports that Honda is expecting, or has the capability, to field 18 cars on this year's Indy 500 entry list. That's 5 more than their current full-time allotment, which they expect to be 13. Now, she reports that there are 16 spots essentially expected by Honda, with a possible 2 more to come. And I'll add a little bit more to this, saying if Chevy matches that with another 18 cars out of their stable, that gives us a max entry of 36 cars for this year's Indianapolis 500, which would, of course, match last year's number. But obviously, it's very early days. There's a lot of things that still have to happen. But I figure we need to talk about this a little bit, and I'll probably expand on this in another video at another time. But where are we with the Indy 500 and the entry list right now? Well, the big thing that's kind of been breaking, and that was something that Jenna Fryer reported on, several other outlets have reported it as well, is that it seems like Fernando Alonso is going to take the vacant seat in Andretti Autosport, which last year was filled by Connor Daly. Of course, Connor Daly is now at Ed Carpenter Racing, so that seat has become available. A lot of people speculated, including myself, that James Hinchcliffe would get it, but that appears to not be the case. Now, here's the big thing, and probably the thing you read about on the headline of this video, is that Alonso is not particularly liked by Honda, and I don't know if he particularly likes Honda either. But you've got Honda engines in the back of Andretti Autosport cars. So if this is happening, and I'm skeptical still, even though, as Jenna reported, there's not a space for him at McLaren, which that's hard to understand what that means, ASPM. And you would think that them switching to Chevy was specifically so they could run with Alonso. Maybe there's a little more bad blood between Honda and McLaren than we previously thought. But what happens with Fernando Alonso? I mean, there's a lot of baggage there. Though, I will say this. There's the possibility that some of that baggage has kind of waned a little bit, maybe more so on the Honda side, because they have started winning races in Formula One. They've been getting both of their teams onto the podium, even Toro Rosso. So from that perspective, perhaps they're thinking, let's let bygones be bygones. They know the amount of press that Fernando Alonso brings. And the other thing that they know is that Fernando Alonso is going to be very hungry after the defeat last year, not even making the race. They know that Fernando Alonso has probably the best chance outside of a Penske car to win the race in an Andretti Autosport car. They have experience with that driver and team combination. That's a comfortable place for all those pieces to fall, I think. And it could be a potentially race-winning combination. So what does that mean? Well, that means a lot of press, a lot of Honda badges, and it's probably going to be good PR for Honda to mend those fences with Fernando Alonso, because it means just another 1,000 articles being written about how accommodating Honda is to bring this driver back in that everybody knows is very good for the race, to be there, to attempt to make the race, and then eventually, hopefully, be in contention racing for the win of the race. So that's what I think on the Fernando thing right now. There's still obviously a long way to go and a lot of stuff to develop there. What about the other 5 cars potentially coming from Honda? Because the Chevrolet thing is outside of Penske and Ed Carpenter, we don't really know the rest of the Chevy lineup, because then you start getting into teams like the full-time teams, which we still don't know, which are Carlin and Foyt, and then you start getting into the Indy-only teams like Dragon Speed, where we don't know the driver, or the Clausen Marshall team, which you would assume that's Pippa Man, but they partnered with Foyt last year. Nobody knows what's happening with Foyt. So the Chevy thing is still, you really don't know what's happening with Chevy, but you kind of can figure out what's going on with Honda. In saying they have the capability for 18 cars, then you start to think, okay, well, there's probably an extra Andretti, which would bring them to 6 out of their stable specifically. If you add in Jack Harvey, that makes it 7, but of course he's a full-time entry, so that wouldn't count there. So 1 extra for Andretti. Possibly one extra for Rahal. There's still the question of whether or not that car is in play full-time. That would probably be a no at this point. It seems more likely at this point that Santino Ferrucci is going to re-sign with Coyne, but stranger things have happened. Then you go with, well, Dale Coyne. What happens with Dale Coyne? Is there a third car there? There usually is. It's usually with the Bird Racing team, and there's already a stated intention to bring James Davison into the Indy 500. You would assume it'd be with Coyne, but there's always a possibility it could be with a different team. Then you start asking the question about, well, what about McLaren? If they couldn't hire Fernando Alonso, or they didn't want to hire Fernando Alonso, or Fernando Alonso didn't want to drive for them, was there a third seat available? Is there a third seat available? Is that a place where Hinchcliffe could go? Could he go to a Rahal car? We do know that last year, of course, in the last couple of years, that Rahal car has really been a ride-by seat. So assuming Hinch hasn't had the money for a full season, it's hard to imagine he'd also have the money for a for an Indy 500 ride that's, you know, that requires an entire budget to be brought with no sponsorship. I think that's a big ask. So I mean, there's a lot of possibilities out there right now. It feels to me like the Indy 500 entry list this year is a little less clear than it has been in previous years. It seems like there's a little bit more turbulence in the air than there have been the last couple years. For whatever reason, a little less stability, a little more question mark, or a few more question marks, I should say, on teams like Juncos, which of course had to shutter their IMSA program, or at least put it on hiatus for a little while. So who knows? A lot of things are still up in the air, and of course we'll be able to talk about that as it develops. But I think it's going to be fun, and a reunion of Fernando and Honda, I think that could be a really positive thing for the sport, because, you know, you want rivalries, you want some bad blood, but you don't want some of the biggest drivers and the biggest manufacturers feuding. That doesn't do a whole lot of good for anybody, and ultimately it probably cost Andretti Autosport a shot at having Fernando full-time last year, and he probably doesn't want to ever try to do that again. But losses will be losses. Anyway, so let me know what you think down in the comments section below. Let me know what you're looking forward to in 2020. I've got a lot of stuff on this channel that you'll be looking forward to, so I'm excited to share all of that. Thank you guys so much for watching. This has been David Land on YouTube, and I will see you in the next video.